everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits and I love spray painting sock blanks. This lets you get a really shallow application of color, and since there is resist from the knit fabric in the blank itself, when you unravel the blank you can get some really awesome modeling and large speckles that have a fairly regular pattern, but it's still really fun with sock blanks. And so I want to compare one of my favorite food coloring sprays, the Color Mist sprays, to three different spray things. This is just a spray pen I got at a craft supply store. This is a Misto pressurized spray bottle, and then this is a more like cleaning. I think I got this at like Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that. What is a sock blank? A sock blank is a piece of knit or really crocheted fabric that is created with the intent for you to dye it and then unravel it. Now, these blanks that I'm going to use today are double-stranded, which means that they have two strands of yarn knit together. So when you unravel it, you can get two matched 50-gram balls of yarn. So whatever random pattern we do on this blank here today, we will be able to get identical socks out of the end, which is really fun. The sock blank we're using today is a Stroll sock blank. This is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. And if you want to learn more, I will have an affiliate link to knit picks down in the video description. But the reason why when you spray this, you get these speckles is the color will pretty shallowly land on one side, and so we'll be spraying the right side of the fabric today. But then the wrong side won't have as much color penetration. And so this will allow for that difference, which I will show when we unravel this blank in the end. Now, this is not the first time that I have explored these devices on a sock blank. In a live stream that I did a few years ago, I looked at all of this in a really epic long live stream during part of a sock blank special. But I wanted to evaluate this in a standalone episode of Dye Pot Weekly, so that way the conclusions that we get are a little more obvious. When you're dyeing yarn with food coloring, you need four things. You need the artificial food coloring, you need acid, you'll need heat, which we'll get from the microwave later, and then you need a protein-based yarn. So wool, alpaca, silk, those things all work great. This will not work on acrylic or cotton or other cellulose and synthetic fibers. I am going to pre-soak our sock blank in some water that had 3 to 5 tablespoons of white vinegar for at least 30 minutes so it can be nice and saturated. I prefer to add the acid to the yarn if I'm going to do hand painting versus mixing it in with the dyes, but different dyers have different preferences. I just know that red number 3 specifically starts to crash out of solution when you have it in acidic conditions, so I like to have it already come into contact with the yarn when that dye hits acid. I removed a lot of the pre-soak from our blank, and I'm now spreading it out on the counter, which is protected with some plastic wrap. In a previous video, I mixed some colors. I think we have some pink in our Misto from the Color White system, some orange in this spray bottle, and then some base crimson in our little spray pen. So you can go and check out that video to get a sense of the proportions. But our goal today is not to try to get discrete specks from these different spray containers. I want to try to get even-ish coverage, but light coverage, so that we see color on this side, but then when we go and wrap it up, there's not color on the other. So when we unravel it, we'll get some speckling. So that is our goal. And I hope that we will be able to differentiate between the different colors. But let's start with this pen in towards the middle. So I believe this is crimson. I'm holding it maybe 6 inches from the surface, and that worked pretty well. The line isn't the straightest, but I was able to get pretty even coverage adding a little more color. And I'm coming in with my clean glove. You can see that while we have color on top, we don't below. I'm not gonna double check for each of these, but that did a really nice light color coverage, and I am happy. Now, for comparison's sake, let's grab our color mist spray. And this, which I believe has like alcohol or something in it, this is something that I love to use and absolutely gives us that light coverage. And so here, there's no question that, again, we will have very little color penetration to the other side, but I do want to try to avoid moving this blank as much as possible. Okay, so now for our Misto, I am pumping up the pressure. And let's, ooh. Okay, so this is just the base pink, and that is working really well for even coverage. And it doesn't have that like spray that I get with the color mist. And let's just check. All right, it does potentially, I can see it going through the stitches onto the bottom. It's not necessarily going to give us as light coverage, so maybe I should try to do a lighter layer with it, and I'll try that over here. Because I think that there is a lot more liquid, and I'm coming in, I'm higher up to do that spray. And this time, I'm still seeing the color go through. And let me zoom in and see if I can show you guys. Okay, so you see these droplets right here? If I move this aside, you can only kind of see. There are droplets beneath it on the surface. But we will see when we go to unravel it in those pink sections, if we're seeing some speckles from some resist. And I absolutely 100% plan to unravel this. And now we've got our big spray bottle, which I'm trying to stay a fair amount back, wiping these edges. The goal is not to spray my whole kitchen. And you'll notice that I gave myself a wider area to work with this color. And I am also seeing, I'm not sure if you can tell, but I am seeing, let me see if I have just a new paper towel. I am absolutely seeing some color come through from it. So I am now not going to lift and check as much anymore, but that is just worth knowing for the difference between this orange and the light one. So right now we have big spray bottle, Misto, color mist, and then our pen. Let's do another section of our pen. Is my glove? Oh, it's because it was collecting on my glove. I was like, the spray pattern felt fairly unique there, but that is fine. It still feels a little unique. Oh, and I did use most of this color, so there's not very much left from that. I might mix more for another project I want to do with this series. But I think what I'm going to do now is take this last section and spray just once with this spray bottle to get that coverage. So I am pretty excited. And oh, I didn't mean for it to be somewhat repeating, but the nice thing is this is a blank, so we will, when it unravels, we'll get matched skeins. But now what I'm going to do is use this plastic wrap from our protecting the work surface to wrap up the yarn so we can steam set it. So I'm going to take this and wrap that over. And this side, wrap this up and over. And I need a little bit right there. If you weren't worried about color transfer between the different sections, you could absolutely just take your blank and pop it directly in the bowl. But I do want to attempt to keep these colors somewhat separate. And so now I'm going to take this, pop it in a microwave safe dish, and go and microwave it before it has a lot of time to compress and for those colors to move around. I am microwaving the yarn on high using 2-minute increments, so that way I can check and make sure that it's getting hot to touch but isn't going to dry out and burn. This is why I recommend doing small increments, and your timing might vary depending on your microwave. Now, as for the feel of the different containers, I think my favorites, well, I love these color mist sprays, but they're expensive. So I really liked this little squirt pen. Since it takes such a small volume of liquid, it would make it really easy to get really concentrated colors in here. The sprays are pretty controlled, but gives you even coverage. And yeah, it's not very messy. So I really like this, and hopefully I can find a similar product on Amazon. I also really liked the Misto, but the downside is that each one of these is kind of expensive. If you wanted to do multiple colors, you'd either have to completely wash this in between or purchase multiple to begin with, which is fine if this is the kind of thing you're going to do a lot, but can start to add up and get expensive, and then a lot of pieces that you need to clean. So these are all things that are worth considering as you plan with your equipment. I think the other reason why I like these pens is when I bought them, I think I got a pack of 3 or 4. And so immediately that gave me multiple colors I could use all at once. However, I've got my fingers crossed because every refillable option is better than buying more of these, even though I like these, but just in terms of waste and overall expense, I think it makes sense to have something refillable, especially because you could then transition them to using with commercial dyes, and I don't think there's a commercial dye spray. Actually, Jacquard might have a spray, like a refillable pressurized spray can. I've never tried it. Is it like UCAN? That's something worth investigating more. Our blank is now piping hot to touch, so I'm going to let it cool completely so then we can unwrap, wash it, and then we will come and unravel it. So even with these colors, it started penetrating to the other side, and I can't really touch this very much right now because it's warm. There will still be modeling of color, but whether we see the high contrast of speckles that we see with the color mist, I'm not sure. And the advantage of this is I think it doesn't have very much water. It is an alcohol-based spray, which is one of the reasons why you get that shallow color penetration. The 4 devices we use today are actually the exact same ones I used in that live stream many years ago. This is worth noting for a couple of reasons. One, I haven't really used these other spray bottles in all that time, except I have used the color mist. I've used that a fair amount. So that is worth considering, but I am curious. I don't know if I'm going to go back and watch that old stream to see if my conclusions vary with what I have today, but I have a feeling that my preference was these pens and the Misto back then as well. But I also think my handle on dyeing in general was different, and my experience now is different. So it's fun bringing all these things together and revisiting some of these techniques to make the content easier for people to consume. So once the yarn cools, we can go wash it. And for me, it might take a little while, but for you, it will happen in a snap. Let's unwrap our spray painted yarn. This is a really pretty, subtle, fake stripe, and from some part that sort of came off, we can see some of the modeling and subtle speckles that you get. So I am excited. And looking at this, I see a difference in pigmentation with all of the colors. So we will see. And oh, yeah, if I spread it, see in the pink, you can see that white. That's going to give us those speckles. But anyway, let's add a little bit of some pale dish soap, but we're not seeing any bleeding. So I'm going to gently rinse out this soap, put the blank through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and then we'll take a look at the dry blank so then we can unravel it. Here is the quote right side of our finished blank. And then here is the wrong side. Just look at the difference in the amount of color we see here versus what we see on the side where we sprayed the color. And this happened because these spray bottles allow us to get a really shallow layer of color on the yarn. Now I think that we have our pen, our Misto Sprayer, our big spray bottle, and then our color mist. And I think I went pretty heavy on the color mist, and we actually see some color coming through. And I had a lighter hand with the big spray bottle. The pen sprayer has this a little interesting pattern on the wrong side, which I think has to do with, because it was so small, there's some areas where it may be forced to dye through the other side versus the other types. I love the way that these colors have blended together on the surface, which wasn't even necessarily something I was thinking about. But imagine this turned into some sort of speckly socks, and that'll just be so fun. Now, I am going to go and unravel this off camera, but I wanted to show what some of the speckling looks like and how you have regions of color and white. And this is definitely starting from the wrong side to unravel. But the thing is that these patches really match up from the two strands. It's not perfect, but it is matched. And if you zoom in, you can see where the coverage is on the stitches. And then as you spread out, where those whiter patches come from. And so again, the two strands aren't perfect, but the transitions of color will be similar on both. So when it comes to knitting socks, it's not going to matter that this orange section is smaller than the one that we started with, or that maybe this isn't super straight, because those small levels of variation will be the same on both of the skeins that we unravel, which is, I think, my favorite part of these double-stranded sock blanks. Now I'm going to go off camera and unravel this blank onto my Nitty Naughty, and I'm going to do it by hand, so that way we'll be able to see that color progression and look a little bit at the different colors that we have here. But in all the sections, when you pull them apart and see that white present, that is how we know that we will get those speckles, because we got uneven color coverage, as that was the goal of this project. Here is our finished speckled gradient, and this is amazing. You can really tell the difference between the oranges that we used, but we've got this beautiful modeling pattern because of the light layer of color we got on our yarn. Zooming in even further, you can see really good modeling and speckling with all of the different spray devices we used. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter what you use. What matters is that you aim for the lightest application of color possible when you're using the yarn if you want to get speckles like this. Some people aren't a fan of this kind of speckled effect, because even if you are going to dye a sock blank and say dip dye it, you will see some amount of variation from the resist of those stitches themselves. But I am of the opinion that you should embrace this unique feature of these blanks, because it allows you to create something amazing like this. And as I've shown in the past, you can spray the front side flip it over, although in this case I would absolutely wipe down the counter in between. But you can flip it over and spray the reverse side with another color. And in doing that, then you can get some alternating color in here, because there would still be a little bit of white, but a lot of those white areas would have a different color on them. And it is just so, so, so fun. What happens next? When I remove the yarn from the Niddy Noddy, you can see it has this crimp to it. I am going to go soak the yarn so that way that crimp can relax, which will make it easier to wind into a ball or cake later on. I also want to point out again that the thing that is the best about these double-stranded blanks is that these two skeins here are going to be matched, which means that as you knit them into socks, you'll get those color transitions to happen at the same time, as long as your gauge when you're knitting your socks is the same, of course. And so if I were to have spray painted two blanks, there would have been some slight differences between the two, but within each of them, we would have this pair of matched 50-gram balls of yarn, which means that you can go as regular as you want or as wild as you want and end up with a matched pair, which is a lot of fun, and I highly recommend you take the opportunity to play with some blanks. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel, give the video a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. I want to try this experiment with acid dyes at some point in the future. Clearly, there is no color mist spray, but the technique with these other spray bottles should translate extraordinarily well. In general, any technique that I do with food coloring can be done with acid dyes as well, as long as you're using dedicated dye equipment that isn't also used for the preparation of food. But the techniques when you compare acid dyes and food coloring are extraordinarily similar. If you love the yarn I dye and want to know what happens to it after the videos are done being filmed, head over to the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop and check it out. My shop is filled with hundreds of skeins of hand-dyed yarn featured in these videos, and shopping in my store is a really great way to support the content here on the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and get some beautiful hand-dyed yarn at the same time. I always include the video title and approximate publication date in the item description, so that way you can go and watch the video to learn more about the yarn before you buy it, or you can rewatch the video while you are working with the yarn and turning it into something amazing. Thank you so much for watching, everyone.